There is a sense in which at the legislative and policy levels, there are positives which have been happening. For example, we are seeing an increase, a slow but gradual increase of numbers of states which have established certain laws or specific laws on access to information. So you see, that is very welcome. We're also seeing judiciaries around Africa which are quite proactive in terms of ensuring that the rights of people to express themselves are not undermined. However, at the same time, we are also seeing trends of violations. Journalists continue to be quite unsafe in Africa. We see journalists continuing to be killed, continuing to be injured, continuing to be stopped from undertaking their professional work. So that is something which is happening. We see journalists being harassed, online harassment, again, that is happening. And unfortunately, we also see that the we see governments which are responding to particular situations by shutting down the internet. The internet is an important tool for facilitating expression and information. And so when governments shut the internet, that cannot be a good thing in terms of their obligations to respect a freedom of expression and access to information. So in my advocacy, I am really calling upon or on governments to stop the practice of shutting down the internet. I think even where there may be problems of disinformation or misinformation, there can be better ways of dealing with that without actually shutting down the internet. There is an instinct, perhaps amongst state bureaucracies or politicians, to suppress views which run counter to theirs, to those of them who are in power. I suppose it's an instinct that we do not want to hear you speak because your view will be different than ours, and we are the ones who are ruling. And honestly, that cannot be a good way of dealing with things. I think society progresses better where there can be robust engagements and where there can be disagreements, because where there are disagreements, then what happens is that you have discourse, and then you have positive results out of discourse. If you have society which is closed, society which simply says yes, then that society cannot really progress. Of course, this also has been proved in respect of development. If we shut down people from speaking, people will not say when they are hungry. People will not say when they are thirsty. So you see, we will not know, where famines are happening, where drought is happening. We will not know where people are dying from treatable diseases. So really, I think we need to have that. Africa needs to be smart in this regard, that actually expression and information facilitates the exercise of all other human rights. I think independence is over-touted as a term, because really, Aaron supposes, one can have a theoretical notion of independence if independence supposes independence from everything around you. If you were to think about independence in those terms, then one would be saying that the Commission would need to be independent of states, independent of NGOs, independent of stakeholders, and that really doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. I think at a more practical level, the questions on hand would be whether the Commission is able to execute its functions, its stated functions, its legally stated functions effectively. And so you then have to look at specific functions. If you look at the Commission's protection function, where complainants can file cases before the Commission, and the Commission can make determinations on those cases. I can assure you that in that respect, once a case is filed before the Commission, there are very clear procedures and rules on how to deal with that. And no one, either state or civil society organization, would actually be able to interfere, or indeed does interfere with that sort of process. I think the Commission has had to have engagements, for example, with the African Union Commission, in respect of providing the Commission with more autonomy, for example, in respect of recruitment, to make sure that we are more efficient. But you see, ultimately, we still anyway have to be resourced by the Commission. I think the question of independence comes up, for example, in respect of the request by the policy organs a couple of years ago for the Commission to deregister or to withdraw the observer status of the coalition of African lesbians. So that was something which happened a couple of years ago. I think the Commission made its position quite clear in a series of activity reports which were submitted to the policy organs, to the effect that no one's rights may be violated, no one may be discriminated on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity. I think the eventual decision to withdraw, to acquiesce, to agree to the request by the policy organs, I think I would I would term that as clearly, perhaps, I don't know, political considerations came into play, pragmatic considerations came into play. From time to time, clearly you can blot your record. Perhaps in due course, we will be judged on whether indeed we blotted our record in that regard. But I'm sure there were clear pragmatic considerations which were had in respect of the specific withdrawal of registration of the coalition of African lesbians. I think moving forward, as I said, therefore, it's not about a theoretical notion of independence. It's about focusing on quite specific issues. It's about asking, is the protection mandate under threat? And the answer is assuredly no, it is not under threat. There have been questions which have been raised about procedures for giving observer status to NGOs, and that is a consideration which the Commission is quite clear about. We are extremely happy with the procedures which we use presently, because they mean that these sessions, such as this one, are places where we can get independent thinking, independent information from around Africa by people who actually work on these issues, these NGOs. So I think the Commission will be intent on ensuring that its current frameworks for the providing observer status to NGOs is not undermined.